Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
thank you very much for the interview and welcome on the program.
Thank you.
Some days ago, you said that it is extremely likely that Putin personally gave the order to use the nerve agent to attack the former double spy, Mr. Skripal. What do you have as evidence, you and the British Parliament, to support this judgment?
Well, I think it's very important, first of all, to show that we think the culprits for this are not the Russian people, not Russia. We have no quarrel with Russia. I love Russia, and I have Russian ancestry, so that's not the issue. Our issue is with the Kremlin and with the Russian state as it currently is. And the reason I said what I did was because if you look at the stuff that's been used, it's a Novichok agent. According to our scientists at Porton Down, they're very good. We're going to get the OPCW in. The Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons is coming in today to look at the sample that we have of the nerve agent. You also have to consider that Sergei Skripal, the guy that they attempted to assassinate, is somebody who's been identified as a target for liquidation, and that Vladimir Putin has himself said that traitors, i.e. defectors such as Mr. Skripal, should be poisoned. So it's a Russian-only nerve agent.
That's understandable. Do you have any solid evidence that Putin directly ordered it? Because what you said is the most direct accusation of Russia's leader ever.
Right. Well, I'm afraid he's in charge of the clattering train, as we say in the UK. Somebody has to be responsible. Somebody has to be accountable, and we in the UK think that the evidence for culpability points to the Russian state. And as it did in the case of Alexander Litvinenko, and you remember the trail of polonium led back very clearly to the Russian state. And in the end, Mr. Putin is in charge. And that is, that I'm afraid he cannot escape responsibility and culpability.
Why did you make this statement without waiting for the outcomes of the investigation that you are conducting right now? I don't mean you, but the British government.
Well, we are giving the samples, obviously, to the organisation, to the technical experts who are coming today. And by the way, I have great confidence in them. Let them decide what they make of them. They will look at them in the best possible laboratories. But I'll tell you the reason for wanting to get on with it. Is because we have such bitter experience of what happens with Russia, with Putin's Russia, I should say, with the Russian state under Putin, when we have a problem like this. 12 years ago, we had the assassination in London of Alexander Litvinenko, and at that stage, this was an extraordinary event. And with polonium, and the UK proceeded with immense care and slowness, and we decided to work with the Russian judicial system to try to extradite Mr. Kovtun and Mr. Lugovoy, who were strongly suspected of having been responsible. And in the end, we just got a sort of sneering, sarcastic refusal to engage with our judicial process. And we felt it was very important to take this decision, to get on, to show that if you are going to recklessly to use nerve agent of a kind that hasn't been used in Europe since World War II, if you're going to do that in Salisbury, in Wiltshire, then you've got to face some diplomatic consequences, and that's why we
Mr. Johnson,
began.
You argue that the source of this nerve agent Novichok is Russia. How did you manage to find it out so quickly? Does Britain possess samples of this?
Well, I interrogated very closely, as you can. This is a very. I mean, let me be clear with you. I wanted, when I became Foreign Secretary almost 2 years ago, one of my objectives was to try to reach out to Russia. I really did. And I went to see Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, against the advice of some people, by the way, who said it was a totally futile venture. But I wanted to, because I genuinely think Russia is an incredible country, a fantastic place, and it pains me to see the way things have got between us. And so I'm genuinely distressed by what has happened. But when I look at the evidence, I mean, the people from Porton Down, the laboratory.
So they have the samples.
They do, and they were absolutely categorical. I mean, I asked the guy myself. I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "There's no doubt." So we have very little alternative but to take the action that we have taken. But I must say, the difference between this time and what happened 12 years ago with Alexander Litvinenko is also that there is much more sympathy in the international community, far more understanding of the kind of behaviour that Russia has been engaged in the last few years. And round the table here in Brussels, talking to all the other European countries, there's hardly anybody who hasn't experienced directly or indirectly some kind of, malign or disruptive behaviour.
That's understandable, but in an interview on Sunday, you mentioned that you would like to have a constructive cooperation with Russia on the issue.
Yes.
How do you see it, having accused Putin directly?
Well, yes, and as the Prime Minister said on I think Monday of last week, a week ago, we gave a choice. We said, look, this stuff is Novichok. If there's a rational explanation of how it has escaped your stockpiles and how it has come to be used on the streets of Wiltshire and Salisbury, then come on, let's work together and get to the bottom of it. If, on the other hand, there's no explanation, we can only conclude it's the agency of the Russian state. And we got no answer. We were treated with a sort of satirical, lots of sarcastic tweets and trolls. And
but
tweets.
the Kremlin says that they would like to have an access to the case materials. Will you allow this access to Russian investigators?
Well, I think in the first instance, if I may respectfully say to the Kremlin detectives, I think we will trust to the technical experts of the Organisation of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons who are here, arriving in the UK today. Let's see what their assessment is. That's the proper procedure that the UK has to follow under the Chemical Weapons Treaty. And I just have to say that I find the Russian position about what has happened to this Novichok absolutely bizarre, increasingly bizarre. We're told, one, that they didn't make any Novichok ever. There's one position that they take. I think that the Russian ambassador to the EU said that. Second, they say, yes, they did, but all the stocks have been destroyed. And the third thing they say is, yes, they did, but all the stocks have been destroyed except some which escaped to other countries like Sweden and the Czech Republic and Slovakia and America and maybe the UK. I think they need to make their mind up about this. And of course, if Russia, if the Putin regime can clarify or explain what has happened, then we are all ears, and we're only too willing to listen.
Has the British government denied Russian diplomats access to Yulia Skripal, who is a Russian national?
Well,
if yes, what were the reasons behind this decision?
I hesitate to sound protective of. Well, let me just say that, to the best of our knowledge, agents of the Russian state have just tried to assassinate both Yulia Skripal and her father. So I think it's our job at present to protect them as far as we can.
So the British government and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom both have announced some measures, and you're going to expel 23, or you have already expelled 23 diplomats from Britain, and you got a symmetrical response. Yeah. What other measures are you going to take? What will be the targets of these measures? I understand that some of them are non-public.
You must understand Ms. Nemtsova, Zhanna, we don't want to do this out of any particular. I don't take any joy in this.
I'm not
and I
talking
really
about
don't.
joy. I'm talking about
But
what measures will be taken.
So we have expelled 23 diplomats, probably spies masquerading as diplomats, and there are other things that we are going to do. And in particular, yes, we're toughening up our borders. We have plenty of laws which allow us to crack down on money in the UK that has been illicitly or
Unexplained
wealth orders.
Right.
That is money that's been illicitly or corruptly obtained. We can do that. We have the National Crime Agency, the National Economic Crime Unit can do that. But I must, and they will get on with that work. But I must stress to you that the UK is a country under the rule of law, and I cannot, as a politician, say, go after that person's cash, do this, do that. That's not how it works.
So you're not going to develop any list like the one that was developed by the United States, the so-called Kremlin list?
Well, we are sharing. Obviously, we share intelligence, we share information. We do share lists of people with friends and partners around the world, but we operate under the rule of law.
But can you say that?
So it's a matter for the criminal law enforcement agencies to determine whether there is a case to answer.
But Mr. Johnson, can you say right now that all officials who work for Mr. Putin, including Igor Shuvalov, he has a luxurious property in London, that he will be deprived of his property, and the officials like him?
I think the worst thing I could do now, given the work that's going on, is get into individual names or cases, because all these individuals have, as you know, deep pockets and very powerful lawyers, and I'm sure that almost anything I said about anybody would be taken to be prejudicial to any case.
Okay, I will try to put it in another way. So you referred to some Russian businessmen as related to Putin, so they might be punished. What criteria will be applied in determining that one businessman is related to Putin and another is not?
Well, again, I think you're inviting me very rightly, but you're inviting me to go further into the detail of such cases, and I think it would be wise for me to do, because all such legal actions are open to challenge under our system, and it's very important that there should be no sign of political bias or interference, and there won't be.
You said that you felt a lot of support from the European Union and the United States. Do you think that these countries will take any radical measures? For example, they will throw out Russia from the United Nations Security Council, or impose new sanctions? Why are you laughing?
Well, I think because in order to change the composition of the United Nations Security Council, you would need a unanimous vote of the Security Council, and I don't think Russia is likely to vote in that way. So, I think, we have already been very struck and surprised, actually, and very encouraged by the strength of support and the strength of feeling and the level of sympathy for the UK. And what we want to do is to work with our friends and partners, sharing intelligence, countering disinformation, mounting defences against cyber warfare, tracking the money, trying, as we were just discussing, to crack down on people who may have illicitly or corruptly obtained their wealth. There is all sorts of work that is now going on, but the objective, I must stress this point, the objective is not to punish the people of Russia at all. The objective is to try to show that we care deeply about the kind of disruptive and dangerous and reckless behavior, reckless with human life, that we've seen from Russia, and that we want to put pressure on the regime to find a new path. And they can find a new path. And there can be cause for hope. But there won't be cause for hope if we simply allow this kind of thing to happen.
Mr. Johnson, thank you very much.
Thank you.